The air is thick with incense and dust, but neither masks the smell of blood. In the courtyard, a man is bound upright, his arms stretched and lashed to a wooden frame. Around him, the crowd gathers in a tight, unblinking ring, their faces a strange mix of hunger and ritual, pity and awe. Somewhere behind them, a court official unfurls the Imperial decree, his voice flat, unhurried, as if announcing the weather. A knife flashes. It does not pierce deep, not yet. The first cut is small, almost delicate, as if the executioner were an artist placing the first brushstroke on a scroll. But this is not art. This is Lingchi, the slow slicing. Death measured in fragments, a sentence reserved for only the most despised. For centuries, storytellers and foreign travelers would call it the death of 1,000 cuts, spinning tales of savagery and cruelty, exaggerating, mythologizing. They would turn it into spectacle, stripping away the politics, the law, the theater of power behind it. But what you are seeing now is no myth. It is a tool of the state, as deliberate as the ink on the emperor's seal. Every slice is a warning, every gasp a message. The body is not just being destroyed, it is being dismantled as a symbol. Today we strip away the legend and step into the cold machinery of a punishment designed not merely to kill, but to break the human spirit before the soul departs. The square wakes before the sun. Mist clings low to the ground, curling between worn cobblestones as if reluctant to rise. A faint drumming begins beyond the city wall, slow, deliberate, the sound of skin on wood, announcing not a festival, but a reckoning. From the narrow alleys, people begin to flow toward the open space, their steps quick yet cautious, as though drawn by something they both desire and dread. The banners come first, long poles swaying with silk strips the color of aged blood, each one painted with brushstrokes sharp enough to cut the morning air, proclamations of the emperor's will. They move like ghosts above the crowd, whispering that what is about to happen is not cruelty, but order. In the center of the square stands the frame, two upright posts bound by a crossbeam, weathered by sun, rain, and the weight of bodies that have leaned against it before. Around its base, the stones are darker, stains that no amount of rain has washed clean. The officials arrive in unhurried steps. Their robes are pressed, their faces unreadable. They carry scrolls sealed in vermilion, tied with silk cords. When they take their places, the murmur of the crowd falters. All eyes turn to the empty frame, waiting. And then the condemned. He does not walk so much as he is carried forward by the press of soldiers. His head is shaven, the exposed skin pale against the dark fabric of his torn tunic. His hands are bound in front of him, the rope cutting into skin rubbed raw. In his eyes there is no wildness, only the flat gaze of someone who has spent too many nights awake, staring into the black space between breaths. The executioner waits by the frame. He is not a monster, merely a man with steady hands and a cloth-wrapped knife. He wears no mask. His face is bare, his eyes fixed on the rope in his grasp. When the condemned is brought to him, there is no exchange of words. The body is turned, arms stretched outward, wrists lashed to the wood. The rope creaks. The man is secured in place like an object on display. A court official steps forward, unrolling the scroll. His voice is clear, unshaken. He reads the list of crimes with the same measured cadence as one might recite the names of ancestors. The words are formal, stripped of blood and breath, yet heavy enough to press the chest. They fall into the air like stones into still water, each ripple carrying outward through the crowd, through the memory of every person who listens. The drumming stops. Silence descends, so complete that even the wind hesitates. You can hear the faint rasp of the condemned's breath, the shuffle of a child shifting in their mother's arms. Somewhere in the back, a man coughs, quickly smothering the sound. The executioner steps forward. He does not raise the knife yet. His hands move to the cloth at his belt, tightening it. He studies the body in front of him, the way a calligrapher studies the surface of the paper before placing the first stroke. The condemned stares straight ahead, neither pleading nor resisting, his jaw locked against the trembling that wants to rise. This is not yet death. This is the pause before it begins. The space in which the living are reminded that their lives are not their own. They are given and they can be taken. Around the square, the people lean forward ever so slightly. They are witnesses, but they are also part of the sentence. Their presence completes the punishment. Without them, the act would be only violence. With them, it becomes a warning. The banners shiver once in the faint wind. Somewhere above, the first light of morning brushes the silk, turning its red into something almost alive. The condemned closes his eyes. The theater is ready. The play is about to begin. The ink was always darker in winter. It sank into the parchment slowly, each stroke deliberate, as though the brush itself understood the gravity of what it recorded. In a quiet chamber far from the execution ground, a clerk bends over a table, his breath clouding faintly in the cold air. Before him lies a decree already half written, the crime in careful calligraphy, the sentence waiting to be sealed. There is no trembling in his hand. He is not the judge, nor the accuser, nor the executioner. He is simply a man who knows where each character belongs, how much pressure the brush requires, how to space the words so they carry the weight of law. Yet, as the bristles glide across the paper, they draw more than symbols. They draw the outline of a man's last days. Outside these walls, the world moves in ignorance. Merchants haggle, mothers call to their children, and soldiers patrol the streets. But here, inside the records hall, life is taken apart without a sound. The decree will travel through layers of authority, from magistrate to censor to minister, each adding a mark, each making the sentence heavier, more real. The crimes that warrant Lingchi are rare, but not mythical: treason, murder of the patriarch, acts deemed so poisonous to the empire that death itself is not enough. The condemned must be unmade, body, name, and memory, so that the offense leaves no seed to grow again. This belief is older than the paper on which it is written. The brush pauses only to dip into ink, black as fresh blood on iron. The clerk resumes, describing the offense in the same unbroken tone one might use to list the contents of a storeroom. The words are elegant, almost beautiful, stripped of emotion. That is the point. Here, cruelty is not loud. It does not need to shout. It moves beneath layers of order and ceremony, wearing the mask of justice. When the final stroke is laid, the parchment is set aside to dry. The ink will not smudge, it will not fade. A seal is warmed over a candle flame, pressed into vermilion paste, then stamped at the foot of the decree. The red circle blooms against the pale fibers, its edges perfect. Somewhere in the city, the condemned still draws breath. He may be eating or sleeping or staring at a wall. He may not yet know that the path beneath his feet has already narrowed to a single point. In this room, the decision is complete. On paper, his body no longer belongs to him. The decree will be rolled and bound in silk cord. It will pass through hands that will not linger over it, eyes that will not read every word. By the time it reaches the magistrate, who will order the execution ground prepared, it will be just another document among many, a piece of paper in a stack, a mark in a ledger. And yet, between its brushstrokes, there is the faint outline of a man bound in the cold morning air, of silk banners moving above a silent crowd, of a knife pausing before the first cut. In the stillness of the records hall, the seal cools, the ink dries, and a life is reduced to a few lines on a page. The violence has already begun. The knife will only finish what the brush has started. The first cut is never meant to kill. It is meant to announce, A thin line opens along the skin, shallow enough that the blood wells slowly, almost politely, as though even the body hesitates to disturb the silence. The crowd does not gasp, not yet. This is only the beginning, and beginnings must be controlled. The condemned's breath shudders, the sound catching in the back of his throat. His arms are pulled taut, wrists lashed so tightly that the rope bites into the bone. He cannot move. He can only feel the blades whisper against him, a touch that promises a depth it has not yet claimed. The executioner's hands are steady. His movements follow a pattern older than memory, an order of incisions that speak a language only those in his trade fully understand. It is not improvisation, it is ritual. Each slice is positioned with precision, chosen not for speed but for endurance. The body is to be dismantled as one might unpick a garment, stitch by stitch, until nothing holds it together. The second cut blooms brighter. The air carries the metallic tang of blood, mixing with the faint sweetness of incense drifting from the edge of the square. Somewhere, a child begins to cry, and the sound is hushed with a firm hand. This is not a place for pity. The condemned's eyes flicker, not toward the blade, but toward the horizon, as if distance could free him, as if he could step beyond this wooden frame, beyond the watching faces, beyond the decree that binds him tighter than any rope. But the frame holds, the ropes hold, and the law holds. There is nowhere to go. The crowd leans closer, some unconsciously tilting their heads to see better, others forcing themselves to stand straight, unwilling to show that their legs feel weak. In the front row, an old man watches without blinking, his hands clasped behind his back. He has seen this before. He will see it again. A third cut, this one deeper. The condemned exhales sharply, and a low sound escapes him. Not a cry, not yet, but the first crack in the wall he has built within himself. The executioner does not look at his face. His focus remains on the flesh, on the measured rhythm of his work. Every drop that falls is a sentence in the emperor's language. It says betrayal will be answered, defiance will be consumed. The body is not yours to keep. It says, we will take you apart in such a way that your death will not be quick enough to grant you mercy, nor slow enough to give you hope. Time in the square stretches thin. The rhythm of the cuts becomes the only clock. Pain folds in on itself until each moment feels like an hour. The condemned's knees begin to sag, but the ropes do not allow him to fall. His body is held upright, displayed, so that every face in the crowd can read the message written in blood. When the knife pauses, it is not for mercy. It is to choose the next line in the script. The executioner's fingers rest on the handle, feeling its weight, knowing it will speak again. And when it does, the words will be carved deeper. The square is full, but no one moves. Bodies stand shoulder to shoulder, pressed close enough that the air feels heavy with breath and heat. Every gaze is fixed on the wooden frame, on the man bound there, on the slow red marks that trace his undoing. Some watch openly, their faces slack, their eyes unblinking. Others steal glances between bowed heads, afraid to be caught looking too long, yet unable to turn away. A few look not at the condemned, but at the executioner, as though in his calm, mechanical movements, they might read some private truth. Near the front, a woman stands with her hands clasped tightly, the knuckles white beneath her skin. She does not weep. Her lips are pressed into a line so thin it might vanish. She watches each cut as if counting them, as if each number brings her closer to something she cannot name. Behind her, children are lifted onto shoulders, their small eyes wide with something they cannot yet understand, but will never forget. For them, this is not cruelty. It is a lesson, a warning planted deep before they even know the shape of defiance. The smell drifts outward, reaching the edges of the crowd. It is thick, metallic, impossible to mistake. It moves with the wind, slipping into the lungs of those who thought themselves only spectators. The taste lingers. Some swallow hard as though to push it away. A man in official robes stands apart, arms folded within his sleeves. His expression does not change. He watches because he must, because the sentence he approved must be seen to the end. This is not pleasure. This is duty, or so he tells himself. The condemned hangs between breaths. His head tilts forward, sweat sliding down his temple, catching in the curve of his jaw before falling to the ground. The drops vanish into the dust, unnoticed by all but him. Somewhere at the back, a whisper begins, a soft murmur that moves like smoke. A story is being told, perhaps of the man's crime, perhaps of another execution long past. It threads through the crowd, shaping how they will remember this moment, whether with fear or satisfaction or unease. And yet, beneath all the shifting faces, one truth binds them together. Every person here has chosen to remain. None have turned away. Their eyes are part of the blade, their presence a second set of ropes that hold the condemned in place. The executioner steps back for a moment, wiping the knife on a strip of cloth. The act is small, almost polite, but it draws the gaze of the entire crowd. It signals that the next act is about to begin. In the silence, you can hear the faint creak of the ropes, the slow drag of the condemned's breath. The crowd leans forward as one, drawn closer by the gravity of what they cannot stop watching. When the knife rises again, they do not look away, not because they want to see, but because now they must. It is not only the citizens of the empire who stand in the square. Beyond the inner ring of onlookers, there are faces unfamiliar to this land, traders in heavy coats, missionaries with notebooks pressed against their chests, soldiers from far-off ports whose hands rest on weapons they will never need here. They do not speak the language of the decree, but they understand the spectacle before them. One of them, a man with pale skin and sharp eyes, lifts a small brass contraption to his face. A moment later, the soundless blink of a shutter swallows the scene into a piece of glass. The condemned is caught mid-breath, the executioner's blade suspended in air. The moment is sealed, yet stripped of the scent, the heat, the breath of those who stand here. Later, these images will travel across seas. They will arrive in drawing rooms and news offices, their edges curling with salt and distance. The story they carry will not be the one lived in this square, in foreign hands. The slow, deliberate cruelty will become something else, a shorthand for savagery, a stage upon which the empire's enemies can mount their own accusations. Some will embellish the number of cuts, multiplying them until the mind can no longer picture a body enduring so many wounds. Others will describe the executioner's face as grinning, his hands eager, though they never saw his eyes. They will speak of the condemned as saint or monster, whichever better serves the telling. And yet in these retellings, the quiet truths will vanish, the trembling breath, the woman counting cuts, the weight of silence that clung to the crowd. What remains will be a shadow play, distorted and rearranged to fit the shape of another's fear or another's need for proof. The men who took these stories will never taste the iron in the air, never feel the way the sound of the blade seemed to scrape against the inside of the skull. For them, the execution exists only in ink and image, a curiosity, a moral lesson, a weapon for arguments far from this square. But for the empire, the purpose has not changed. Whether witnessed by loyal subjects or strangers from across the sea, the message is the same. The emperor's will reaches beyond the body, beyond the city walls, beyond even the borders of his realm. In the square, the knife lowers again. Blood slides down the blade's edge, darkening the cloth at the executioner's belt. The foreigner's notebook closes, the camera is tucked away, and the crowd leans forward. The story will travel, but the truth will stay here, buried in the dust, where no one will find it. Death comes without ceremony. One moment, the condemned is straining against the ropes. his breath shallow, his eyes clouded. The next, his weight sags completely, head tilting to one side, mouth parted in a silence deeper than the crowd's. The body has stopped fighting. The blade has done its work. But the punishment does not end here. The executioner steps forward, his movements still measured, as if following a pattern etched into his bones. He does not pause to honor the stillness. He cuts again. This time the slices are not for pain, they are for disassembly. Flesh is removed in deliberate sections, as if the man before him were not a man at all, but an object to be broken down into its smallest parts. The crowd does not scatter. They watch as the remains are altered, as if this final stage holds some secret the living must know. Blood gathers at the base of the frame, soaking into the earth, the color already deepening in the cool air. Flies arrive sooner than words. In the Empire's belief, the body is more than its living vessel. To leave it whole is to grant it passage into the realm of the ancestors. To tear it apart is to sever that passage, to condemn the spirit to wander rootless. That is the true finality of Lingchi. Not the loss of life, but the denial of rest. The remains are not given to family. They are scattered, burned, buried in unmarked soil, or left for the wind to claim. There will be no tomb for mourners to visit, no place where offerings might be laid. The man's name will fade from household prayers, from whispered memory. Even the dust will not know him. An official turns away, signaling the end. The banners are lowered, the decree rolled and carried back toward the magistrate's hall. But the execution ground remains stained. As it always does, the frame will be cleaned, the ropes replaced, yet the earth will keep what it has taken. Some in the crowd leave in silence, walking quickly as if distance can erase what they have seen. Others linger, staring at the empty frame, perhaps imagining their own weight against its wood, their own wrists bound where the rope now hangs loose. Above, the sky is pale and empty. There is no sound but the slow sweep of wind across the stones, carrying with it the faintest trace of incense. A reminder that the act, however brutal, was wrapped in ritual. The body is gone, but the message remains, and tomorrow, or next season, or next year, another will stand here, another name will vanish, and the ground will drink again. It did not end with outrage. It ended with calculation. By the turn of a new century, whispers of reform crept into the court, not from sudden pity, but from the knowledge that the Empire's face was now seen by the world beyond its borders. Foreign eyes had lingered too long on the execution ground, turning it into a mirror the Empire no longer wished to hold up. In quiet chambers, ministers spoke of modernization, of appearing strong yet civilized, of trading old punishments for new symbols of control. But the language they used was the same language that had always surrounded Lingchi, measured, detached, wrapped in the silk of legality. The cruelty was not confessed, it was simply shifted. The final sentences were passed in the same way as all the others. Scrolls unrolled, seals pressed in vermilion, names written with the same black ink that had outlived generations. Outside the city, the execution grounds were prepared without knowing they would be among the last. The frame stood in its familiar place. The crowd gathered, the knife still gleamed. One of the last to die this way was bound on a winter morning, the breath of the onlookers rising like smoke. The executioner's hand moved without hesitation, as if unaware that his craft was about to vanish. The cuts were delivered with the same precision, the same slow rhythm that had echoed through centuries. When it ended, the crowd dispersed as always, some satisfied, some silent, none knowing they had just seen an ending. In the following seasons, edicts were issued, the language dry and formal. Lingchi was replaced by other forms of execution, swifter, cleaner, less likely to stain the Empire's image abroad. The frame was dismantled, the knives were stored away, or left to rust in corners no one would speak of. Yet the memory of the punishment did not disappear. It lingered in the spaces between words, in the way officials still spoke of making examples, in the quiet fear that moved through villages whenever imperial messengers arrived. The blade had fallen for the last time, but the shadow it cast remained. For those who had seen it, truly seen it, there was no forgetting the slow unmaking of a body, the way the crowd had stood as both witness and accomplice, the way the ground itself seemed to drink the lesson it had been given. The form had ended, but the purpose had not. Even in silence, the knife still spoke. Time buries the frame, but not the memory. Streets are paved where the crowds once stood, markets rise where the ground once drank its red lessons. Yet in the language of the people, in the metaphors whispered in anger or grief, Lingchi still breathes. It appears in poems not as an execution, but as the slow taking apart of a life, a loss delivered in pieces, each one small enough to be born, but together enough to hollow the soul. Writers use it to name betrayals too vast for a single wound, to speak of years stolen by hunger, by exile, by the grinding weight of obedience. The body is no longer bound to the wooden frame, but the feeling remains, a life reduced slice by slice, until nothing recognizable remains. In the minds of those who know its history, the punishment is no longer a spectacle in the square. It is a shadow at the edge of their thoughts, a measure against which all other cruelties are compared. When officials strip a family of its land, when soldiers force a man to kneel in the dust, when a sentence takes not only a life, but the name attached to it, the word returns, Lingchi. Even in faraway lands, the image survives. A photograph, grainy and faded, hangs in a museum display. Visitors pass before it, some pausing to stare, others moving on quickly, unwilling to meet the eyes of the man frozen there. The story told beside it is brief, softened, the true weight of the act hidden beneath polite phrases. But for those who look long enough, something in that still image unsettles them, the way the body leans forward, the rope cutting into the wrist, the knife just beyond the edge of the frame. The punishment's cruelty has been inherited, not by the blade, but by the idea. It is summoned when people speak of injustice that comes not in a blow, but in a sequence, each act survivable, but together impossible. It is a way of naming the kind of harm that unravels rather than shatters. And somewhere, in quiet conversations, there is still a belief that no one truly escapes it, that even those who give the orders, who press the seals into vermilion, who keep their hands clean, they too are marked by it, that the act stains not only the condemned, but the whole ground on which it was done. The frame may be gone, the square unrecognizable, the knife locked away, but in the silence between words the slow slicing endures. The square is empty now. No banners, no crowd, no murmured decrees carried on the wind. The frame is gone, dismantled long ago, yet the earth still holds the memory of its shadow. Stones, darkened by rain and time, lie quiet beneath the pale wash of morning light. If you stand here long enough, the air seems to remember, the faint trace of incense drifts where none burns. A coldness clings near the ground, as if the soil itself resists warmth. In the stillness, footsteps sound louder, and each one feels like a trespass. No names are spoken here. Those who pass through avoid looking at the center, glancing instead at the shops and houses that have grown up around it. To them, this is only another space in the city, but for those who know or suspect, there is a heaviness that cannot be paved over. Once voices had filled this place, the flat recitation of crimes, the sharp intake of breath before the blade met flesh, the restless shifting of the crowd. Now there is only the hum of wind through narrow streets, the occasional call of a vendor far away. The silence feels deeper than absence. It feels deliberate. Somewhere beneath these stones lie fragments too small to name, flecks of bone, grains of dust that once carried blood. They are indistinguishable now from the earth, Yet they remain, waiting in the quiet. The lesson that was once carved into living bodies is no longer performed, but it has not faded. It lingers, unseen, in the way people measure their words, in the way they lower their eyes when questioned, in the way fear can shape a life without ever raising a knife. And so the ground waits, not for another crowd, not for another decree, but simply for the next life to be marked in a different way. The slow, unseen kind of marking that leaves no scar the eye can trace, yet hollows everything beneath. Here, in the stillness, the theater is gone, but the stage remains. The silence is complete, and it does not forgive.